All right, guys. So we're doing something really different today.
Not too different.
It's not like so fucking different, but it was not what we were planning on doing at all. Basically, we had a whole thing where it was going to be a normal episode, but I did the thing again, you know, where
the rabbit hole,
the
spiral,
and I can't stop myself, but it's because of this case, and I'm mind blown about it. I want to have a long conversation about it. So I called Morgan whenever I realized like how far into this case I was getting, and I had so much, and I basically was like, yo, I can either do a 2-parter, one in 2023 and one in 2024, or I can take this episode and we move yours over because hers is more aligned with the next episode.
First of the year.
Yeah, 171. So I was like, let's...
Is this not 171?
No, this is 170. Did you say 171 in the beginning?
I did.
Good deal. I didn't even catch it, clearly. I was over here in my own fucking head. We decided to let me basically do a crime takeover of this, mainly because this case is shocking. It's a case that's very different from what we're normally covered, but what caught my eye even more so about this case was who had not covered it. I had never heard of it before, which blew my mind. So I knew it wasn't in my circle of my regular rotation. So I had to kind of go digging for it because I found it on an article talking about like any true crime case that has like a strong call to action. That's what I was looking for. I came across this one, immediately started searching for a podcast that I could listen to just get me familiar with what the case is because I'd never heard of it. And there were very few and far between, like not the big main creators that you would expect to have an episode about this. They don't have one.
That's weird.
There are
Do you
some
think for a reason?
I don't know. There are some. I think that this case is just truly like hidden. Like I think it is just one of those cases that is almost too complex and too big that it seems challenging and something that you don't know if you can fit into a script. And it's kind of all over the place, but that's literally like our specialty.
For sure.
So I was like,
that's the definition
of creeps and crime. So I'm like, we can get this shit done. And I couldn't stop. Like I could not stop myself. I went down every single rabbit hole. I read until 3 a.m. on articles and books and police reports and files that have been released over the years. So I'm going to cover this a little different than I typically would cover a case like this.
Excited.
I know, I'm very excited too. And the reason why I'm covering it this way is because I want you guys to be like thinking with us. So this is the case of the disappearance of 31-year-old Joan Risch, who was a wife and mother living in Lincoln, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston in 1961. So it's an old case. It's 62 years old and it's unsolved.
That's crazy that 1960s was 6 years ago.
I know. That's crazy.
Whoa.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. This case to this day is unsolved and she has never been declared legally dead.
Oh, wow.
So
okay,
let's go into it. And I don't want to seem like I'm excited. I'm not excited. It's just that I really do think that if more people talked about this, something would come of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's be those people.
Let's be those people, guys.
Get your thinking caps on. And let's get creepy.
All right. And the reason why we initially decided that I was going to tell you guys what the blurb of the case was is because I want you guys to be listening, like paying attention, using like hindsight is 2020 type things so we can bring different things to the table. Okay. So in the town of Lincoln, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston, on Tuesday, October 24th, 1961, 31-year-old Joan Risch woke up at 6:30 a.m. with her husband, Martin Risch, to kiss him goodbye, as he had to leave early in order to catch his 8 a.m. flight from Logan Airport to New York City for a business trip where he would have to stay overnight for one night in Manhattan. Martin and Joan were really used to this because it was a normal occurrence in Martin's field. The young couple had just moved to Lincoln 6 months prior with their 2 children, Lillian, who was 4 years old, and David, who was 2, from Ridgefield, Connecticut. This was a pretty big move for them, but especially for Joan because of having 2 children, having to be alone with them throughout the entire day because her husband worked
Having
long hours. No help, knowing no one. And he had to go on business trips a lot, so he was gone. And
it's terrifying as a mother.
Yeah, and this is even prior to
Not
the move.
that we're mothers, but I can imagine
Not that
terrifying.
we're mothers, but like I can agree that is something that's terrifying. But even prior to the move, like this was a lot, but at least in Ridgefield, Connecticut, like she still had her village with her. Like she loved Ridgefield. Moving to Lincoln, where they knew basically no one, was incredibly intimidating, but Joan worked swiftly from the time that they arrived in April of 1961 to make friends and get really involved within her community. The home that they chose to purchase and live in was a bit hidden from the hustle and bustle, sitting pretty far back off of the road and relatively private as neighboring homes were a good distance apart yet semi-visible to each other. And I have you guys maps and photos to follow along with on our Instagram, which are going to be extremely helpful. That is exactly what they wanted for their children. A quiet place where they could safely play out in the yard, and it was quiet, away from scariness of cities. However, for a stay-at-home mother, this was pretty isolating. Luckily for Joan, she was really good at making friends and picking good ones. So it didn't take her too long to become besties with all of her neighbors, but specifically one named Barbara Barker, who lived directly across the street. Barbara and Joan got along very well. They were a similar age, their kids were the same age, and the only downfall about their relationship with them being neighbors was the single road that separated their homes because they were across the street neighbors. This was Old Bedford Road. Like I said, both of their homes sat pretty far back off the road with winding long driveways. So they only had partial view of each other's houses. But it was almost necessary for them to be back that far because of just how busy this road was, and it scared the shit out of Joan to think about.
So wait. The road was curvy. The driveways were curvy?
The driveways were like long, and because it went off the road. So it wasn't necessarily like hilly or anything, but there were woods around and trees, and it was just farther back. So if you were at a certain position on either property,
you could probably see a light on in the house.
You could see like a little bit of the house, but never like a full view. Okay. You could either see the driveway and so on and so forth. So that Old Bedford Road, which separated her and Barbara's house, really like stressed her out. It was very, very busy because it went straight out onto Route 2A, which is also called the North Great Road. Also, this is my hand-drawn map.
She just whips out.
Yeah, so I've been sketching this case. Yeah, theirs is the one with the star, and this is gonna be the one that you guys see as well. So the Joan Risch's house is the one with the star. Barbara's directly across the street. Okay. So Joan didn't want the kids to ever think it would be okay for them to cross that road, like ever, even if it was to play, even if they looked both ways. She never, and neither did Barbara. So they very rarely, if ever, would walk across to each other's properties. They would always just drive across each other's properties. Now, despite all of this though, Joan and Martin were really loving their new home, their community, and their friends. And not long after Martin left that morning on October 24th, Joan woke up Lillian and David. She cooked breakfast, ate with them, got everyone ready for the day, and then next, she quickly took David over to Barbara's house so that she could go run some errands, and she and Lillian both had dentist appointments in Bedford that day. Barbara held David and waved goodbye to them as they pulled out of her driveway in their 1951 blue Chevrolet sedan, and Joan and Lillian got to their 9:30 a.m. appointments at the dentist on time. Lillian had her cleaning, and Joan had a cavity filled. At this point, this was almost a weekly occurrence for Joan, literally, because she had only moved there in April and immediately got this recommendation from her college friend Sabra, or some people say it differently, but I know a girl that was named Sabra spelling her name like this.
I know a girl named Sabra, S-A-B-R-A.
Yeah, what does other people say? Sabra is what other people say. I call her Sabra. So she called her friend from college who actually lived in this area and asked, like, who's your dentist? I need a dentist. And Sabra gave her Dr. Goodstein.
Can you pause? Can you imagine getting cavities filled
in the
1960s?
No. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know what it was like. Was that the day that they just learned? Like, was that the literal year that they learned about teeth care? Because it was like around that time.
I have no idea, but that is terrifying.
Terrifying. So since she moved there and started seeing him in April of 1961, it's October. She had 11 cavities filled with Dr. Goodstein.
Oh, wow.
Because again, like oral care, dental care was so new, and it still was like rapidly developing and learning to be more of like a permanent, like not permanent fix, but a better sealant and fix for
and yet
cavities.
Companies still, some employers still don't give dental insurance.
Exactly.
Crazy.
So it goes crazy like that. Anyway, she had gotten 11 cavities filled. So this was literally a weekly occurrence for her. She chatted with Dr. Goldstein about how she was doing, about her house, how she's liking her neighbors, how she's loving Lincoln, how Martin's going out of town, before she scheduled another appointment the following week for another cavity, and they left. They quickly ran over to a shop where Joan bought herself a brand new bra and some clothes for the kids. Specifically, I think she bought like 2 things for David and maybe just a little something because Lillian was there with her in person. And then lastly, they ran into the grocery store to grab some things. Joan and Lillian returned to Barbara's to pick up David at approximately 11:15 a.m. Joan and Barbara then chatted for a little bit, standing outside per usual, just laughing and talking about their day and like catching each other up to speed as fast as they possibly could before one of their kids interrupted and they had to go home. Well, that eventually happened. So Joan then put her kids in her car and drove across the street back to their home.
I was always that kid.
Yeah.
That's it. Wrap it up. Let's go, Mom.
Oh, I never was. I was over there being like, so tell me more.
No, I was like, can we go?
You're so bad. You still do that.
I know.
Oh, God.
I hate conversation.
You do. It's so crazy because we literally have a fucking podcast. So Joan, Lillian, and David all go back across the street to their house. Once there, Joan collected the mail and the milk that had been delivered. Mind-blowing. Literally, milkman.
That's nuts.
That's nuts. It had been delivered while they were gone, so she picked it up and got the kids inside. Now, there are differing accounts on if we know for sure that she got the milk. We don't know for sure, because of different accounts, if she actually got the mail.
Okay.
Because then she would have had to walk all the way down to the end of the driveway. So if she didn't stop and get it when she was crossing over, then...
But the milkman came to the front door.
Milkman dropped it off at the front door.
Okay.
Which she picked up. Right after they got inside, the dry cleaner delivery service man came to pick up Martin's suits, which was like a normal thing. And he waited inside the front door, so like inside the house. He knew them well at this point, while Joan went and collected all the suits and gave them over to him. And they just like chatted, said their goodbyes, and he left. Finally, when he was gone and everyone was gone and Joan was done with her shit for the morning, Joan finally was able to go put on her not so formal clothes, because it's the 60s. So this is what she picked to hang around her house in. A blue house dress and white sneakers. That was her comfy fit.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine if we lived back there?
Oh my gosh.
No.
Imagine if we time travel to the 60s and we show up in platform Uggs, sweatpants, and a hoodie. I'm like, what's up?
They'd be like, you are going to hell.
What's up, Barbara?
Yeah, what do? Are you a drifter? That's what they would think we were.
Yeah.
Immediately. Or witch, even worse.
For sure a witch.
So anyways, she changed into her comfy clothes, which was a blue house dress and white sneakers. And I think she had like a little bit of a white or cream. Some accounts said that she had a white or cream sweater over top.
And you know that dress had the
skirt
insert.
Yeah, it was it was
puffy.
I would wear it to Sunday school, nowadays. And she was like, these are my sweatpants. That's crazy. So then she fed the kids lunch. She ate lunch. She laid David down for his afternoon nap, which always went from noon to 2 p.m. Like David was clockwork on that shit.
Atta boy.
At 1 p.m., Barbara brought over her son Douglas because Joan and Lillian were outside as Joan was working in the yard, and Lillian and Douglas were the exact same age, and they played together at this time every day during David's nap time. So Joan was outside working in the yard. Barbara brought Douglas over. They played. As Douglas and Lillian played, with David napping upstairs in the home, Joan was in and out. She was pruning plants. She was messing around in the yard before she put her shears up in the garage. And just before David woke up at 1:55 p.m. He wakes up at 2. Joan goes and gets Lillian and Douglas, holds their hands, walks them across the street, across Old Bedford Road to Barbara's house, along with Lillian's tricycle. All she says once they get over to like his playset area at Barbara's house was, "I'll be back," before walking across the street back to her house. However, she did not tell Barbara, who was inside the house that the kids were just dropped off at, that she had done this. Therefore, Barbara had no idea that the 2 4-year-olds were at her house
outside
in her possession at the moment, which was so out of character for Joan, like something she would never do, because A, she's scared as hell of that busy street and doesn't ever want the kids to think that they can walk across it. Right. It wasn't until Barbara saw the 2 of them outside playing and asked them, hey, what's going on,
How'd you get here?
That she even knew what happened. And basically Lillian and Douglas were like, Mom walked over and said that she'd be right back, and she went back home.
And I feel like Joan? Joan. I want to call her Joanne. I feel like Joan also she was clearly transparent. She was a good fucking mother. So she would walk up, at least knock on the door. Kids are out. I got to go.
Yeah, like David woke up early.
But there was clearly something urgent that she couldn't even do that.
Right. That she just immediately picked up shit, walked him across, didn't even knock on the door, didn't even call when she got back to the house to let Barbara know.
Yeah.
Like that could have been even faster, if anything. It wasn't until Barbara saw the 2 of them and asked them what the hell happened that she even knew that they were out there. And that wasn't until approximately 2:15 p.m. How many minutes
20
was that?
minutes.
20 minutes. They had been outside. At this point, Barbara had gotten the kids inside, both Lillian and Douglas. And she just kept them because she was like, this isn't like Joan. Maybe something happened. Or maybe I missed it. Maybe she did knock on the door and I missed her and the door was locked. Who knows?
Yeah.
But still, she was like, you
would take the kids with you.
Well, yeah, but that I would be like, what the fuck? I would call you, like, you just left them outside, Morgan? Like, what the fuck happened? It better be something good.
Yeah.
You better
got a good story to tell me.
I would be mad. I would be like, why would you leave them outside after you walked them across the street? I thought we agreed to never do that.
Right.
But if you were like, I started throwing up, or, David had a massive blowout. It was everywhere. I was overwhelmed. I was just running back. He was squalling in his crib. I didn't want to get him out until I could go give him a bath, and I wasn't going to be able to watch a kid. So I just threw him over there. I meant to call you. I'm sorry, but he was just losing his shit. I would not care.
Yeah.
But if
no communication, breaking every rule that you set, every boundary.
So Barbara's pissed. So Barbara gets the kids inside and she's like, what do y'all want to do? And like talking to them, again, this is around the time of 2:15 p.m. And she hears a sound come from Joan. She knew it was Joan's voice the second she heard this sound, and it was like a shouting sound. It wasn't a scream, more like a disciplinary or stern and loud voice, as if she was getting onto a kid. And the only thing that Barbara could see, because again, she's inside the house looking through the window at Joan's house, was that she could see Joan strangely like rushing around her driveway. She wasn't sprinting, but like more so like quickly and determined mall walking. She was wearing what looked like her tan trench coat that went all the way down to the ground over her blue house dress, and she was walking very quickly up her driveway from her car to the garage. But the reason that outside of the noise that this caught Barbara's eye and she kept watching was because of how erratic and unusual Joan's movements were, but also she kept getting a glance of the color red, just like in front of Joan. It looked like she was walking with her arms outstretched, bent over, chasing something that was red and low to the ground. Barbara assumed that David had left a car in the toy and she went to go get it and dropped it when she was walking back in and was picking it up. Or maybe she had put a new shirt that she put on David that was red on him, and he was walking down the driveway, so she went to go run and grab him.
Okay.
But also between 2 and 3 p.m., 4 other women also reported hearing shouting coming from Joan's house. Just one shout. These women were playing bridge at Jeanette Swartz.
Swart.
Yeah, I can never
say.
Swart. No, Z at the end. Swartz. Yeah, Swartz. Swartz house, which was right behind, like not behind, but right beside Barbara's house. You can see it on here. Like her property kind of wraps around Barbara's.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jeanette had a bunch of girls over playing bridge, and she is right beside Barbara's house across the street from Joan's. They hear between 2 and 3 p.m. a shout coming from Joan's side. However, the women could not agree on what exactly it was that they thought they heard. They all heard it, but they couldn't put their finger on it. One said that it was a baby cry. Another said that it was definitely a cat. Then the other one was like, it's a woman. And they just kind of went back and forth with this. At 3:40 p.m., Barbara put Lillian and her kids into her car, and she drove across the street to Joan's. She got Lillian out of the car, and she watched her as she walked inside of the side door, shutting it behind her before driving out of the driveway and into town to go pick up something with her kids from the shop. So she didn't confirm that Joan was in there. Yeah. But she saw that Lillian went in, and this is normally what they did. You know, her car was in the driveway. She knows Joan's home. She just saw her. Yeah. So that was at 3:40 p.m. But when Barbara returned home at 4:15 p.m., so just 40 minutes later, Lillian came across the street to Barbara's house. Barbara was like,
hi,
what's going on? And Lillian said, quote, "Mommy is gone. The kitchen is covered in red paint. And David is crying in his crib because he needs a diaper change."
Oh my God.
And Barbara's like, what? Where's your mom? And she said she wasn't at home when you dropped me off. So Lillian explained that she came home when Barbara took her over there. She walked upstairs. She looked around the house. She couldn't find her mom. David was sleeping. A few minutes later, David wakes up and he's squalling and crying and he's got a dirty diaper. And so Lillian, who was playing with her toys right beside the crib, tried to help him, but she couldn't. So then she went out into the yard. She walked around the house. She couldn't find her mom. She was scared to death. David's crying this entire time. She goes across the street looking for Barbara. She finally sees Barbara pull back in, and then she goes and tells Barbara. It's been 40 minutes.
That's terrifying. For a 4-year-old, dude. Holy shit.
Barbara takes Lillian and her kids inside, and then she walks across the street to Joan's to see what is going on, because this is two weird things after another. Mm-hmm. Joan just randomly drops them off in the yard, doesn't tell her anything,
and now the 4-year-old's back in her,
and she's missing
across the street.
Exactly. Barbara walks across the street. She's very concerned, and she thinks that maybe Joan is just working outside and she missed Lillian when Lillian was yelling for her or something, but she knew Joan had to be there because her car was in the driveway. However, she soon discovered that Lillian was telling the truth. There was no sign of Joan. The house was in absolute disarray. David was squalling from his crib upstairs, and that red paint that Lillian said was in the kitchen was blood.
Shit.
Barbara screamed out for Joan several times, but there was no response or sign of her anywhere in the house.
Get that baby.
All right, so now we're switching over to my handwritten notes. That's how mad scientist I went on this shit.
I have a timeline in my hand.
She has a timeline in her hand.
I can't wait.
And a hand-drawn map. Do you still have that, or do I have that?
You have it.
You keep this. You need that. Okay. Joan Carolyn Bard was born as the only child to Josephine and Harold Bard on May 12th, 1930 in Brooklyn, New York. They were a lower middle class family who moved back and forth between Brooklyn and Chicago for good jobs, good paying jobs. Sometime before Joan was 8 years old, they moved to Mountain Lakes, New Jersey. And she went to the first new school that she had ever been to, because prior to this, she'd only switched back and forth from Chicago and Brooklyn. She was described to be very quiet, private, very kind, super intelligent, and just a little girl who loved reading. And a lot of people, when I say private, I want to emphasize that, because a lot of people talk about how she wasn't one to let people into her life. Everything was fine all the time type of girl. Nonetheless, she was a really good girl. She had little friends, but she was never going to go put herself out there. In 1939, when she was only 8 years old, her parents and German Shepherd dog all died in a suspicious yet accidental house fire that was started by a faulty lamp. Now, what was suspicious about it was that her father, Harold, was found lying on the ground in the home, holding on to the phone, but he died of inhalation. Her mother, Josephine, was found in her robe on the couch asleep with solitaire cards in front of her, as if she had fallen asleep while playing the card game. And she also died of smoke inhalation. And then their dog is what the biggest thing is. So this was a trained guard dog. It was very protective. It was trained to be like that. They lived in some not so great areas at some points, and he was there to be their security system. So there's two different accounts on where this dog was found. The first one is that the dog was found wrapped up in a blanket in the basement or in a closet, dead. like it had been killed prior to the fire, which would make sense to the neighbors because the neighbors said that they never heard the dog barking at all.
So someone went after that family.
So someone went after them. The other version of the story is that the dog was found sleeping at the end of Joan's bed where it slept every single night, passed away. Again, no one heard barking. It didn't move. It didn't go try to help them. That doesn't happen with you. Typically, if a dog passes away in, especially a guard dog or a German Shepherd, like a dog like that, a big dog, if a dog like that passes away in a fire, it's because they literally can't get out.
Yeah.
It's not because they didn't wake up their owners or they didn't do something to get the owners awake. The dogs also are normally near their owners. Whereas in both of these accounts, the dog is completely separate from both Harold and Josephine. Now, luckily, thankfully, Joan, at 8 years old, was having a sleepover with her grandmother that night. So
that's fucking tragic.
Yeah. And they just ruled it as accidental. They didn't really look into it, but everyone knew something was off about it. Unfortunately, like I said, she was orphaned at 8 years old. She was then adopted by her mom's sister, Alice, and her husband, Frank. Now, they lived in New Rochelle, New York, and they had 5 kids of their own. This is a big change for her. She went from being an only child to now having...
one of 6.
Yeah, 1 of 6 at this point, overnight. But it was okay because she was not the oldest, but either the same age as one of the oldest, but they were all very spaced out. And Frank decided to change her last name from Bard to Natras, like their last name. This was something that the rest of the family was not happy about. It's not like she really had a choice because she's 8 years old, but he changed her last name to match all of theirs. Frank was an absolute fuck. He was a dick. He was super short, fucking small man syndrome psychopath. Apparently he was the president of his own failing music production studio that eventually failed when Joan was a teen, and this caused the family to really, really, really struggle to make ends meet, making Frank only more stressed, making him even more of a dick. Later, Joan many a times alluded to her husband and other family members that around this same time Frank began sexually assaulting her, but never said it outright until very much later, which we're going to come back to, allegedly. However, it had been long suspected by family and friends that he was doing that, which is very unfortunate that no one stepped in to help her or felt safe enough to step in to help her. Despite her life being as hard as it was, even at this young of an age though, Joan was incredibly driven. She was super happy and positive, still quiet and reserved, but she was super kind, intelligent, gifted level intelligent, hardworking, and had lots of friends that had to beg her to do anything with them because she was I'm gonna go read. That's her thing. She graduated from New Rochelle High School and was awarded a scholarship to attend Wilson College in Pennsylvania, where she graduated in 1952 with honors and a degree in English literature.
Good for her.
She got a job right out of college working at publishing houses. The first one was Harcourt, Bryson World, and then the second one where she was an editor was Thomas Y. Crowell, which are big in New York City. Big deal.
Yeah, that's huge.
In 1953, Joan's roommate set her up on a blind date with a guy named Martin Risch. At the time, he was studying at Harvard Business School, and she was 23, he was 24. They were it. Intellectually, they had met their match. Sexually, they were very attracted to each other. Emotionally, they understood parts of each other because Martin had lost his mom at a really young age. Joan obviously had lost both of her parents at a very young age. And separately, which is so funny, they both went home after their first date and told their friends and family, that's a person I'm going to marry.
Stop.
Yeah, it was meant to be.
Cute.
The couple got married just 2 years later in 1955. They moved into an apartment in Brooklyn, and Martin got a job at a paper company. Joan remained in publishing. In 1957, Joan gave birth to their first child together, a daughter, Lillian, after which Joan left her career to be a stay-at-home mother or a homemaker, which she was very excited about having the opportunity to do because Martin was doing so good in business. They were doing the best that they ever could. Joan and Martin were incredibly happy and excited about this amazing life that they were building, just almost like effortlessly, but obviously like a lot of effort. But it's just like, wow, like it's finally coming. Like I'm getting to reap the rewards of everything that we've done. And it was just falling together amazing. Romantically, professionally, they were thrilled with each other. And with the success in business meant that Martin did have to travel a lot more often for work. So this is where the traveling begins for him. And this was no big deal for Joan because she had her publishing career. She still like did little bits and pieces. And if you work in like arts like this, like you'll never leave it. It's here. It's a part of you. Joan was incredibly capable and driven, just as she was in that career, to be a homemaker, to be a stay-at-home mother and raise her children. She could handle herself, and she made that very clear to anybody who ever asked her about it. This was a choice that she made, and she's fucking okay with this because they're making good money. They're loving their lives. They love each other. Let her do her thing.
Right.
Because I'm sure, people were like, well, how do you feel about him being on business? She's like, I trust him. I don't give a shit. What's wrong with you?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds fine with me.
Bring home the dollar bills.
Yeah,
baby.
Bring home that money. I love you. Do your thing. In 1958, they moved to a quieter town, which was Ridgefield, Connecticut, to raise their family in a quaint, more quote unquote country home where they made so many friends. And they were just loved by so many within this community so quickly. When their son David was born in 1959, they were so excited and decided it was time to upgrade their living style in Ridgefield. So they accommodated their growing family by getting a super nice home. And this one was Joan's favorite because just like not even a mile down this little country dirt path from her house, she could walk directly to the library.
Oh, cute.
So it's got everything that she loves. She loves nature walks. She loves walking with her kids. She likes getting the hell out the house. She's got a nice house and she loves a library. That's like Joan's shit. She was so excited, the happiest she had ever been in her entire life. It had everything that she needed in just like walking distance. And plus like all of her best friends live there.
I want to live there.
I want to move to Ridgefield, Connecticut. How do we get there? Where's
that
at?
What do we need to do?
What is your weather like?
Cold.
Yeah, let me know. So in 1961, Martin got a promotion, which was incredible, life-changing, what he had been working so hard for all of these years. But unfortunately, though, this good news came with a sad reality. They were going to have to leave Ridgefield, Connecticut, their most loved town and community and friends, for Lincoln, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. The couple only knew one single person in Lincoln, and it was Joan's college friend, Sabra Morton. However, they were very excited for this new journey and happy that Lincoln was similar to Ridgefield in the way as it was that still small country town feel, very affluent, very safe, and also like close to the city, close to work. So you got a little bit of everything.
Right.
And the house that they freaking moved into, I cannot, like, it's so amazing. And Morgan has already seen a picture.
So cute.
It's 2-car garage, 2-story. It's a white Cape style, huge, beautiful home with a huge yard, front and back. It's gorgeous. Like, you'll see the pictures on our Instagram. Now I'm going to go back to where we left off. So we're walking back into this house on October 24th, 1961 with Barbara. And I need to give you guys a trigger warning because throughout the rest of this, we're going to be having lots of conversation about potential instances that could happen that have been widely circulated. And these do include discussion of chosen and or unexpected child loss, suicide, disturbing details, and mental health. A lot of mental health that we're going to be talking about throughout this. When Barbara went over to the Risch's house to check on Joan on October 24th, 1961 at 4:15 p.m., she entered through the unlocked side door, per usual. Immediately, the sound of David screaming and crying echoed through the empty home from his crib upstairs. Barbara was instantly taken aback by the absolute disarray throughout the entire home, which was typically incredibly tidy. There was even like a table or a chair that was flipped on its side, and there was a large amount of that red paint that she discovered to be blood in the kitchen. It was on the walls, it was on the floor. There was a trash can that was normally under the sink in the center of the floor. It was filled to the brim with stuff flowing out of it, including the phone and the cord to the landline that's mounted on the wall. It was hanging off the side of the trash can as if it had been hung there. It was sitting beside a carton of beer that was empty, 5 beer bottles, and 2 bottles that were empty of Jack Daniels. And there was also what looked to be a paper towel roll covered in blood in the corner of the kitchen. Barbara began to panic and screamed out for Joan several times over and over again, having to scream over the cries that were coming from David. She looked around the entire downstairs trying to find Joan, but she was not there. Barbara needed to get out of that house and to look for Joan, but she couldn't leave David. She finally built up the courage to go up there, where she found him exactly as Lillian had described, alone, crying in his crib with a spoiled diaper. She scooped David up as fast as she could and held him closely as fast as she could, went through the entire upstairs, every room, every door, every closet, just looking for Joan. And then out the door, there was no sign of her. Barbara ran across the street to her house, where she grabbed her phone and called their other neighbor, Joan's other close friend, Jane Butler, and she asked, if almost like pleads, like, tell me that Joan is with you. Is Joan with you? Is she okay? Now Jane is immediately like, no, she's not with me. What's going on? Barbara barely says half of what's going on. Jane's already out the door across the street helping her. So they lay the kids down, David, Lillian, Douglas, and then Barbara's other kid. They put them in the house, and then together Jane and Barbara go across the street to check on Joan. Together they entered the Risch's home, and they were scared for their lives, but also for Joan. Mm-hmm. Barbara reminded Jane just before they walked in, like, hey, if we don't find her in here, we have to call the police. So we need to not touch or mess up anything. We just need to look for her, and then we need to get out. Quickly, they searched every single room in the house once again, but there was no sign of Joan. The only place that they had not searched was the cellar, which they were scared to do because there was like a table or a chair that had been knocked over and it was blocking it. Finally, they built up the courage together to just move that damn table and go search the cellar, but there was nothing down there. All of this took place within 15 minutes. Everything from the time that Lillian came over to Barbara's. This is in 15 minutes.
That's neighborhood watch, ladies.
That's neighborhood watch. So together, Barbara and Jane rush across the streets to their homes. Barbara goes into hers, where she calls the Lincoln Police Department. Jane goes to hers, where she starts calling Martin's work to try and get a hold of Martin in Manhattan. Barbara's call goes out at 4:33 p.m., reporting this to the police. 5 minutes later, a Lincoln police officer arrives at Barbara's home to take her report and then go search Joan's house. The officer searched through the house and found several other drops and smears of blood throughout it, other than the kitchen. From his training and his experience, the first thing that he thought had happened here was a suicide. When he couldn't find Joan's body, he got even more concerned, because you can't commit suicide and then hide your body.
Right.
At 4:50 p.m., so he had been searching since 4:30. He'd been searching for about 12 minutes at this point. He realizes that she's nowhere to be found. They're wasting daylight, and they need to have a search party out there to search the premises immediately. So he dispatches the entire police department to the scene to aid in a search of the home and surrounding areas for Joan, while others gathered evidence and interviewed the neighbors about the last time they saw Joan. And so here are the potential sightings that investigators were able to join together. And I'm going to have a timeline for you guys on our Instagram. Morgan's is handwritten, scary, but this is what I'm kind of going through right now. At 2:45 p.m., someone called the Lincoln Police Department reporting a young woman who looked to be in her 30s walking west on Route 2A. Now, the map and the photos will show you that this is the road that Old Bedford comes to, just to the left of the Risch's house. She can walk like 300 yards and be on Route 2A. The woman that this person saw and reported looked to be, quote, walking aimlessly, hunched over as if she was cold. She didn't look dirty, but not put together. She was wearing a gray knee-length coat that was loose-fitting and a white scarf or kerchief tied at her chin over her head. The location that this woman said she saw the walking woman was 300 yards from Joan's house, which would be a 3 to 4 minute walk from the house, and the description matched Joan, other than the fact that this woman saw a gray knee-length coat, which Barbara last saw her in a tan trench coat, which goes all the way to the ground. Somewhere between 3:15 and 3:30 p.m., a witness named Eleanor called in reporting another woman who also resembled Joan walking north in the median of Route 128, which was at this point in time a 4-lane interstate. And it had like 75,000 cars that went on this thing daily. It was a full-blown working interstate.
It was busy.
Yeah, they had cars here. We know that.
You don't walk on that.
You don't walk on that. And she was in the median. So she had crossed 2 lanes to get into the median and was walking north near the Winter Street exit, saying that she was, quote, a young woman wearing a gray coat that went to her knees with a white scarf or kerchief tied around her head at her chin, covering her head and the sides of her face with, quote, disheveled hair on her forehead. She was dazed, walking with her head down, stomping around in the median while holding her stomach as if she was carrying something. But this was the thing that got Eleanor to call. The woman's legs. They were covered in blood flowing down them from underneath her knee-length coat. And this was about 5 to 6 miles away from the Risch's home. At 3:25 p.m., the Kings, who are neighbors, their daughter, Virginia, was walking home from her bus stop on Old Bedford Road when she saw an unknown blue or gray, possibly 1954 Plymouth sedan or 1956 Oldsmobile sedan that she had never seen before at the end of the Risch's driveway, like parked there facing towards the house. And it was very, very dirty. Confirming this was a woman named Hilda who lived just like a few streets down off of Old Bedford. She said that she was driving down Old Bedford at 3:40 p.m. heading towards Route 2A when she stopped to let that same blue 1954 Plymouth back out of the Risch's driveway onto the road and then drive the opposite way as her from 2A, so heading north. At 4:25 p.m., another witness reported seeing a woman walking south on the west side of Route 128 near the Tripello road exit who looked to be about 35 years old, wearing a gray knee-length coat and a white scarf tied at her chin wrapped around her head, and she had what looked to be dark mud covering her legs. This location was 4 miles from the Risch's house. And what's interesting about this is compared to the first report that came in about the woman walking on the median of 128 at 3:15 to 3:30 from the Eleanor girl, this is about an hour later, and now she's on the other side of the road walking the opposite direction. So she has crossed now 4 lanes of traffic and is walking down this area. And the area that she was specifically walking had a lot of construction because at this point in time, the government or the state was expanding Route 128 from a 4-lane to an 8-lane road. So there was tons of construction on the side.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Now, there were also other people that claimed to have seen and talked to Joan that day. One being Lillian, saying that mom wasn't there from the time that Barbara dropped her off at 3:40 till when she returned at 4:15. The other one was the milkman who dropped off everything. Granted, Joan was not home when he dropped it off, but nothing looked off to him. There was not another car in the driveway. No cars were in the driveway. No cars were in the garage. Everything looked normal. The postal man said the exact same thing. The guy that came and picked up the dry cleaning, he said that she was in great spirits. They had a great conversation. Nothing was weird. There was no one else in the yard or anywhere. And then also Sabra Morton, her college friend, had talked to her that morning because the day before I guess Joan had been watching Sabra's son, and Sabra came to pick her son up, but Joan was in a really big rush and couldn't talk, which is unlike Joan. Joan typically would sit there and gab it up with her girlfriends. Mm-hmm. So she was in a really big rush. So the next morning, Sabra called Joan, which was on the morning of October 24th, the day she went missing. She talked to Joan and she said, "Hey, I was just wondering why you were in a rush yesterday. I didn't get to ever follow up with you on that." And Joan was like, "I can't really talk right now. I'm still in a really big rush. It was nothing big though. I'll call you back later." Hung up with her. That was before they even went to the dentist appointment. So she's been in a rush for 2 days now, which Sabra was like, "That is not like Joan at all.
That's me.
That's you." It's like if I was acting like you, you'd be like, "Something's wrong. She's mad at me." That's, I'm sure, what Sabra was thinking. Is she mad at me? What's going on? Martin was finally able to be reached by the Massachusetts State Police via his company at 11 p.m. at night through the NYPD, going to find his hotel and get him, which I can't even
imagine
this right now. They finally get a hold of him at 11 p.m. that night, and they get him on the next flight home at 1 a.m. His alibi was fully confirmed by his coworkers, business associates, the hotel, the airplane staff, all of the records. Plus, police determined that he had no motive or cause to want to harm Joan in any way, shape, or form. No one could even imagine that Joan would have ever harmed herself or anyone would want to harm her. After an intense search was performed of the home, the surrounding woods, the yard, the area, all these places where these potential sightings were, there was nothing that got them closer to Joan. Not a single thing. They called all the hospitals, they called the jails, they called everywhere within like a 4-hour radius, essentially. Nothing. Could not find her. Something was very wrong, but also extremely strange, and something that police had never ever seen before. This is what they found in the Risch's home when they searched it on October 24th, 1961. As I said before, the majority of the blood was concentrated in the kitchen of the home. Though I've given you a brief little explanation about what was there and what they did find there, I want to go into the details of it. So we're going to start in the kitchen. There was a small overturned table or chair looking situation that sat underneath the phone against the wall. It had been flipped over and like pushed out into the dining room area. There was a small but overflowing trash can in the floor that was in the center of the floor. And inside of it were 5 empty beer cans and a carton of beer that was Miller High Life, which when Martin saw this, he was like, that's not what we drink. That's not our beer. We don't like that beer. And they were like, well, did anyone bring it over? And he's like, we had friends over the night, 2 nights before, but no one brought anything. Like, no one brought Miller High Life. We didn't have it hidden around the house.
It's not our beer.
Right. Then the 2 empty Jack Daniels bottles, which Martin explained that night, him and Joan had gotten a little drunk before his business trip, and they finished off one of the bottles, and the other one was supposed to be for either the weekend before they had that weekend, the party that they had the weekend before, or maybe a weekend upcoming. I couldn't find like clarity on it. Some of it went back and forth, so it could have been from that weekend, and there was only a little bit left, so they married the bottles.
Those bottles were theirs. Beer, not theirs.
Beers was not theirs.
And the empty beer cans were also Miller High Life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Next, the phone and the cord was hanging on the side of the trash can. It had been very forcefully ripped from its place on the wall. And then there was a broken plastic hanger. Now, typically, this trash can was underneath the sink. And when Martin saw this, like the scene of this, they were like, is this typical for her to do? Like, just throw it out in the middle so she can, throw shit away when she's cleaning up. And Martin was like, fuck no. Fuck no. That trash can is not allowed to leave from underneath the sink. This is crazy. Something's wrong. Like, this is the thing that he was like, that's my wife's pet peeve. Something's wrong. Mm-hmm. She was on top of his ass and her own ass taking out this trash because she hated when it was like overflowing and looked nasty.
And it sure as hell would never be in the middle of the room.
Now, here's me like giving like a plain devil's advocate of some sort, but like, there's shit that I do that I don't allow Logan and I to have done when he's out of town. Mm-hmm. So she could have been like just burning it at both ends that day, or hungover.
Could have been cleaning, and then you move the trash can in the middle because you're throwing shit.
She's throwing shit in it. She's getting rid of all the stuff from when they had this party. She wants a new
phone, so she throws the phone in it.
Exactly.
She's pissed at that.
Yeah, she's like, fuck this phone. Maybe Sabre was on the phone with her, and Sabre said some sideways shit. Not really. I'm just kidding, Sabre. I'm not saying that for her. But like, seriously, it could have been anything. Like, there could be multiple explanations as to why. The thing for me though is that Martin was like shook by this trash can. That's when I'm like, that's out of place. That something's not right here.
I hope Aaron and Logan would be able to pay attention to detail like that.
Logan would be like, the house is clean. Something's wrong.
I don't have a lot of faith.
No. Next, on the either counter or on the ground or on that table that was flipped over, just somewhere below the phone, near the phone, with an apron beside it, the telephone book was pulled out, which was not normal. Even more alarming, it was opened on the Lincoln emergency numbers page, because back then you didn't have 911. So you had to like literally call the fire department, the police department for an ambulance. Yeah, you'd have to do all those things. So that's really concerning, because now we know that right before the phone gets ripped out of the wall, she's potentially looking for emergency numbers. That gives you more foul play vibes than anything.
For sure.
So next, I'm going to move into like the blood evidence that was found in the kitchen, and really it's going to take us throughout. And I want to note that when investigators were there, so probably around that 4:55 p.m. timeline of when like everyone came, so you know, the head detective and everything away, apart from that original police officer that showed up. When they got there, the majority of the blood had been dried. So in the kitchen, there was a large smeared pool or like arch of blood on the ground that looked as if it had been wiped across. And then also on the walls of the kitchen, it looked as if there had been more blood like smeared across it, as if someone was moving with their hand or their like arm against
leaning against it, walking.
Leaning up against it. And then all of this, but specifically the blood that was in the arch on the ground, looked as if it had been unsuccessfully wiped up with something. They find what these somethings could potentially be. It's these overalls and underpants that belonged to David that she potentially bought that day, the things that she got at the store with her bra that day. They were in the kitchen sitting on top of a chair, and they had blood on them. It looked as if they had been used to try and clean, or even more specifically, like soak up the blood. And these overalls had like blood dried into it, as if someone had put weight behind the overalls and like soaked up blood in it, like put it in there, pushed it down as you would if like you spilled something on your carpet.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But this was like a tile floor.
Is this what you're talking about?
Yes. It had been like soaked up into it. And guys, I'm also going to link this page that I have Morgan on right now for you. It's actually a Pinterest board with like everything that you want to, but I forewarn you, there are crime scene photos with blood in them. I will be having a few of them on our Instagram post because they're not necessarily like a typical crime scene that I would never post a photo of. Like, this is pretty different, so I want you guys to be able to see it. I'll link this in the show notes, and I'll also have that in our Instagram. Either way, so it looked like they had been like a heavy weight pressed into it, onto those overalls. Next, there was some blood that was smeared on the wall beside the side door that was unlocked, and below the phone mount there was a 6-inch square blood stain that had been like smeared down. From that, on the floor directly below it, there was blood streaked across the floor and the bottom parts of the walls, leading into the dining room entrance. There was also those paper towels that Barbara saw. Well, investigators determined that that was actually a roll of drawing paper that she had for like the kids, or she would put on the table for the kids to color on, so on and so forth. It had been put on the floor and blood had been soaked into it, and maybe that's what this person or Joan tried to clean up with, and it just fell apart, realizing that it wasn't paper towels. But like, why would Joan, knowing what that is, put that down on the ground?
Right, exactly.
That's really weird. From the kitchen, there were 2 blood trails that led in different directions. The first trail that we're going to follow is inside of the house. From the kitchen, they found 1 drop of blood on the first stair going up into the second floor, and then 2 more drops of blood at the top of the stairs. Each of these were about 1/4 of an inch in size. There was also another drop of blood on or near a window in the kids' bedroom. And then in the master bedroom, police found 8 blood stains or blood stain drops that ranged from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch in size. From the kitchen, there was the second trail, though, that led outside of that side door, through the garage and down the driveway to Joan's car, her Chevy sedan. In Joan's car, there was no blood. On the outside, though, there were various blood stains or blood smears. A 1-inch smear on the front left side of the car's hood, 2 1-inch stains or smears on the back right fender, and 1 2-inch blood stain or pool type of looking situation on the top center of Joan's trunk on the back of the car, like on the hood, trunk lid, as if someone had been like sitting up there. But then again, something so weird, could be a red herring, there was also a coat hanger sitting on top of the car on its roof. However, that is where all of the blood trails end. There is none that lead down to the road. They all stop at Joan's car, and there is still no sign of Joan.
The hangers are either like a key to
what happened
earlier today, or earlier that day, or
a red
like
herring.
It can go absolutely morbid. Or it could give you the answer. I don't know what I'm thinking right now.
We'll get to it here in a little bit because I have 2 explanations for him. So we'll get there.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I'm on with those two explanations.
Yeah. Now, I know that I have been describing this as like a trail of blood that led them both upstairs and then outside of the house. But it wasn't like a trail that we would typically think of, not like someone had been drugged or not like bloody footprints. It was more so as if someone had been walking around with like a bloody nose. And this stood out to investigators as really odd, talking about the fact that there's no bloody footprints because of just how panicked and fast this scene looked to have been. There's tables flipped over, smears everywhere, shit's left in disarray, like just craziness. Like she was moving fast, running around.
It should have been messier.
There should have been more blood throughout. Specifically in a scene like this, the only thing that they could think of was that someone came up behind her and hit her over the head with something, and they truly were like, this had to be a nosebleed.
Yeah.
This looks like blood coming from the nose, walking around someone's house. Like it's stopping mainly on you, but it's throughout the house in different ways, but not like being flooded everywhere.
Without you having a tissue.
What they said is that if someone was involved in this, if foul play is involved in this, the fact that there's no bloody footprints or smeared footprints anywhere means that someone had to be either extremely lucky because it was all over the kitchen floor,
right?
Or they had to be very, very careful to not step in it. And if we based our thoughts off of what these potential sightings from the witnesses had seen of maybe or maybe not Joan, assuming that it was her, she would have had blood on her shoes, likely on the bottom of them, as well as all of these people are reporting that she's got something flowing, blood or mud or something flowing under her dress down her legs. That's what they all described. And she's wearing this knee-length coat and these white tennis shoes. Like if it's coming down your legs, Morgan, if you wake up, you haven't had a period in like 15 years, but you know, like when you wake up and you started your period and you're like trying to make it to the bathroom and it's running down your leg, it's going to be on your leg. You're going to step in it.
Exactly.
No matter how careful you'll be. If you're taking one too hard of a step, it's done. The thing with that is the fact that Barbara was adamant that she saw Joan wearing her tan trench coat in the driveway at approximately 2:15 when she heard that shout. Whereas all these reports claimed that the woman was wearing a gray, loose-fitting, knee-length coat. When searching through the home, investigators found that the only things missing from Joan's home were her, number one. Number two, her gray knee-length coat, her white sneakers, her blue house dress, and one of her many white scarves or kerchiefs that she would put around her head. So they go and they look for that tan coat. Along with that, they were able to confirm what was left behind by Joan, which was almost even more so alarming. That tan coat was found hanging in the closet, the coat closet, and beside it was the empty spot where that gray knee-length coat would have been. They found her purse with her wallet, her ID, and her keys put away in the spot that she always put it when she got home. They found her medication, and she had severe asthma that would be very difficult for her to go without, and all of the cash that she had taken out for the time that Martin was going to be gone. It was all still in the house. There were no signs of any weapons of any kind or any weapons at all found in or around the home, and there was no way to tell where all of this blood came from or who even. The only thing that they could tell with testing was the type of blood that it was, and it was O. And that's everyone essentially at this point in time. So they knew that that was Joan's type, but they could not confirm it that it was hers because they didn't have DNA. This is the 60s. So they have no idea if this is Joan's blood or someone else. They didn't know what to do. So investigators started working with the state police forensics unit and determined, though this looked like an insane amount of blood because it was so out of place and smeared in different places and throughout the home, in reality, it was only about a half pint of blood that was just spread throughout this entire house and yard, thus showing that it was not necessarily a life-threatening injury that she had sustained.
And you might talk about this, but is there any way that like whatever happened to the dentist, she had like prolonged bleeding or something?
Yeah, we'll discuss that. Bring that back up though. I didn't like write it down into the notes, but we'll discuss that. And an analysis showed that these smears or stains and drops that were throughout the house and outside were actually more aligned with a person who would be like slowly staggering about, supporting themselves after receiving an injury, more than an attack of any sort. However, the abruptness and the overturned table and the smears and the franticness that is this scene.
And the missing person.
Right. And the unsuccessful cleanup situation with no weapon, no person. It looks more like there was a struggle that took place here. Maybe, like they said, maybe she got hit over the head and had a nosebleed because of it, but it wasn't necessarily like a life-threatening injury. So basically, investigators had to consider and investigate both possibilities fully in this. Number one, that this was self-inflicted. Number two, that foul play was involved. Supporting the self-inflicted theory is the fact that there is more evidence pointing to only one person being in this scene or in this house than anything else. But also, there's no footprints, there's no signs of forced entry. The witness reports say that she's walking by herself when they do see her, if that is her. Also, like Barbara across the street, no one pulled in that she saw. And lastly, they brought out bloodhounds, to go and try and pick up her scent, because if she's bleeding, she's walking out of the house, she gets on Old Bedford, she turns on to,
track that.
2A, they'd be able to track it. But the dogs only could track her scent in the house to the car, down the driveway to Barbara's house, from Barbara's house back to hers. That was it. As if she had gotten into a car.
The fuck? So then that means, though, is when she brought over Lillian and
Douglas,
she was bleeding.
She would have been bleeding then, but or not, because she could have gone back into the house. Something happened, because remember, Barbara saw her at 2:15, about 25 minutes after she took the kids over there, with something red walking around her car.
Yeah.
Chasing something, arms out. Supporting the foul play theory is the chaoticness of this scene and the fact that there is no body or weapon left behind, and that Joan would never just leave her kids. She would never just abandon her kids by themselves. When she walked Lillian across the street, it was 5 minutes away from the time that Daniel wakes up like clockwork. 12 to 2, 12 to 2, 12 to 2. That doesn't make any sense. But even more so damning is that there were fingerprints. On and around the phone, there were 5 full fingerprints, 1 partial fingerprint and 1 partial palm print. All but 1 belonged to Martin and or Joan on the phone. But the fingerprint on the receiver speaker and the fingerprint on the wall mount where the phone hung did not belong to either Martin or Joan or anyone that had been in their new house. They had only been there for fucking 6 months. They know who's been in that house. To this day, a match has never, ever come up in CODIS anywhere.
What?
To those fingerprints. They're full fingerprints. No one has ever matched with them. Not even when they died, their fingerprints weren't put in the system.
So that does happen when you die. Mm-hmm. Everyone gets fingerprinted.
Everyone gets fingerprinted. You go in the system. From my experience, at least.
Aaron too now.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I think I've been fingerprinted before.
Probably for the university.
Yeah, probably. Anyways, so... and they've never had a match to this day. No one could even begin to think of a single person that would ever want to harm, let alone kill or kidnap Joan, especially in this brand new fucking town that they just got to. However, they did have some leads that they had to see through. It kind of starts around that car that Virginia King saw when she was walking home from the bus stop, and that was also confirmed by that woman named Hilda, who lived down the road. That dirty blue, either 54 Plymouth or 56 Oldsmobile sedan, seen by Virginia and Hilda, was either the biggest red herring of all or the key to all of this. So investigators questioned all of the locals in the area, all of the neighbors, anyone who had been on this side of the town that day around those times, as well as the Risch's milkman and mailman about this car. The milkman said that he had seen that exact same car parked in Joan's driveway up beside her car 5 days earlier on October 19th. And another milkman said that he actually saw that car at some point in the Risch's driveway on the day of the 24th when he was driving his rounds. He doesn't know when it was, though.
What the fuck?
Unfortunately, though, no one saw who was driving this car. Not a single description. Oddly enough, though, 5 or so weeks after Joan's disappearance, an anonymous man called the Boston Record American newspaper with a tip about that car in Joan's case. He claimed to have seen that car in the Risch's driveway on the day that Joan disappeared. Quote, Something about it, end quote, made him feel like something was wrong, a bad feeling. So he took a mental note that the license plate started with P24. I think this is weird.
Me
5
too.
weeks later, this was a national story. This was
Right.
a huge story from the time that it happened.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. And it's
Either
just
you
now,
know whose car that is,
or you heard something and you're giving someone a tip and you're
Yeah.
like, this is what it starts with, good luck,
Yeah.
what are the chances? So you're like, and you're anonymous, you're adamant about being anonymous, never come forward again either to like explain.
Not even to the police station, right? To a news.
To the newspaper. So this was very sus because it had been in the media for like 5 weeks at this point. So it was like slowing down in terms of like her prime time.
Right.
It's just weird that he was so adamant about being anonymous and he's just now reporting this. So they're like, this person knows something. Investigators were immediately like, this is something. So we're going to see this through. So they try to track the call. They're unable to do so. So they run a big search of all registered 54 blue Plymouths and 56 blue or gray Oldsmobile sedans, any of those that start with P24. And they get like 11,000 matches. And then they find the one that they believe is the one because it had been stolen and been gone during the time frame that Joan disappeared. It belonged to this man in Medford, Massachusetts, and they found him in December of 1961, so just a few months after. They learned that this man's car had been stolen and then recovered, and it was completely documented in police reports. The owner was very, very helpful and kind. He handed over his car to be searched by the forensics team, like analyzed all the things by police, but unfortunately though, there was nothing found connecting this car to Joan's disappearance at all. Investigators didn't stop searching for that car though, so they probably thought that this was a false report or they got the wrong car, but they were on the right path type of situation. But what was even more so weird to them was the fact that someone potentially was trying to throw them off of a scent and give them a red herring.
Yeah, track that instead of the car.
Right. So this can also double as more support for the foul play theory.
Right.
This dead end sort of sparked something in Joan's female neighbors, though, because they immediately remembered something odd with the Minuteman National Historical Park. In the fall of 1961, the government began the plans for the park that we have today, Minuteman National Historical Park. Therefore, they needed to buy up all of the land and the homes in that area. So they sent out like agents, purchasing agents, to go talk with owners in this area, educate them on what's going on, and offer them and tell them what the process is about. And one of these men rubbed all of the women the wrong way on Old Bedford. His name was Robert Foster. He was a purchasing agent with the National Park Service, and according to many of the women in the area, he, quote, overstayed his welcome and made them all feel very uncomfortable when speaking to them inside of their homes. According to Foster's logs, he had visited Joan at the Risch's home on September 25th, so a month almost to the day prior to her disappearance. But on the day of October 24th, 1961, Robert had actually come back to Lincoln around 3 p.m. to meet with an appraiser after having lunch with a friend at 1 p.m. in a different neighboring town. And his alibi was confirmed by 3 other people. He was asked if he remembered anything from that day, September 25th, when he had the appointment with Joan to discuss this Minuteman National Park buying their house. But all he could remember was that there was another woman there with her. No one knows who this woman is. They have asked around. They got a description of her. It's not any of her friends that she has in the area. Not any of her friends had come down to visit her from either Brooklyn, Chicago, New Rochelle, or
Not Sabra.
Ridgefield. No, none of them. All of her friends that were in Lincoln were like, it wasn't me. Was it you? Are you sure it wasn't you? Go check your calendar, type thing.
I also, though, feel like maybe it's really not possible that none of the neighbor girls forgot. Because, if they all knew he was creepy, then maybe they were like, hey, I'll come over with you real quick. Or, they were over for tea and he just, stopped by or something.
I mean, maybe, but I feel like they would have known because they hadn't, gone and hung out with each other just alone.
Unless it was Barbara.
Without the kids, unless it was Barbara or Jane or Sabra. And,
Yeah.
that was it. Because it's been 5 months. She's only got this big of a friend group.
Right.
And And everybody else in that town knows everyone. So they had been like, oh yeah, I saw your car over there that day. What was that about? But no one even spotted a car. It was like
fucking weird.
It's fucking weird. Martin was like, she didn't have anyone over that day. So maybe this dude was getting it confused. But either way, he was let go because he had an alibi and he pretty much checked out. But Robert was not the only suspect that investigators were looking into. Almost a year after her disappearance in August of 1962, a tip from one of Joan's aunts led them to look into her adopted father, Frank Natras. This aunt was named Florence Bard, so I'm assuming that this is her dad's sister or something like that. But her last name was Bard, and that's Joan's maiden name. Or it could be maybe like her dad's brother's wife. As a reminder, when Joan's parents died, Joan went to live with Alice, who was her mom's sis, and Frank Natras, her husband, along with their 5 children when she was just the age of 8 years old. And by all accounts, Frank was a terrible and violent, nasty man with no drive or love and no possibility to provide for his family, so he was stressed all the time and let it out on them. According to Florence Bard, just either a month or a week or so, there's different accounts on this. I'm going to go with at least a month because this is letters communication. Before Joan's disappearance, she told her adopted mother / Aunt Alice for the first time in her life in a letter that Frank had molested her and sexually assaulted her throughout her childhood. I'm not sure of the exact timeline of this, but I am sure that Alice and Frank, when this letter and these conversations were happening, were separated at that time. According to Florence, in this interview with police in August of 1962, she explained that Frank had been living off of his sister Grace for a really long time. He was still being awful, but it just made it to where he didn't have to be stressed out about money. But then Grace got sick. He had no more money to even support Alice and their youngest daughter, who was 15 years old or 13 years old at the time. Her name was Evelyn, living at home. To Joan, this put Evelyn in a very vulnerable situation as a teenager because Joan's 15 years older than her youngest sister. Mm-hmm. And she loved Evelyn. They had a very special relationship because Joan was like 15, 16 whenever Evelyn was born, and Frank was off being a psychopath. Yeah. Alice had 4 other kids five other kids. Yeah. So Joan was like Evelyn's other mom. And that was like her baby doll. So she had a very special connection with Evelyn. And she was also very close with Alice, like almost in a way that Alice couldn't get away from her abuser because she didn't have the means to. And so they were kind of in this together, like fuck him, but we have to have him until the kids grow up. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I keep like calling individual people out. She was close with all 5 of her siblings. Like she had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, or 3 brothers, 2 sisters. And 2 of the brothers' names were Ben and Peter. Now, Peter, Joan, Peter's wife, and Martin were like a little bestie couples, you know what I mean? Yeah. They loved each other and they were similar like life paths, you know? They had a lot in common. But she used to also be very close with their other brother named Ben, who now had a very strained relationship with the family because he had began acting like Frank. And he had became Frank's little bestie.
Minion.
Mm-hmm. So then everyone had to ditch him. Either way, when Frank's sister, Grace, got sick, about that same time, 15, 16, possibly even 14-year-old Evelyn began acting out really bad. And she was mirroring very clearly Ben and Frank, which really, really worried Alice and everyone in the family. So Alice decided that it was finally time that she ran. She got the fuck out of this relationship with Frank. Together, Martin, Joan's husband, and Peter, Joan's brother, paid to move Alice and Evelyn in one swoop from New York all the way to California and hide them from Frank. After a few weeks or months of living there, Frank started calling to try and get Alice and Evelyn to come back to him in New York. Everyone was really afraid that he would succeed in manipulating them because that's what he was good at.
Right.
But Joan could not let that happen, as she feared if he hadn't already, Frank would begin assaulting and molesting Evelyn and even possibly kill Alice for running away.
Right.
Which is why a week before or a month before her death, differing reports, she finally told Alice what Frank had done to her because she wanted to warn Evelyn as well.
That was only a month before.
Mm-hmm. We know, let me finish this first and I'll tell you. Actually, I'll do it and tell you now. So the thing with this is that both Alice and Evelyn confirm having gotten this letter, but they were so disturbed by the details of it that they burnt it. And they were sick for 2 weeks. And they even wrote letters to Peter's wife talking about like how absolutely disturbed they were about this letter because Peter's wife knew. And so they had the letters that they had sent to Peter's wife, but they didn't have the one that Joan had written with all the proof on it that this is real. Some people discount this account. I think that
it shows motive for Frank.
It shows motive for Frank, and I also think
she just aired his dirty laundry. She's also the reason that
they all left.
Yeah.
And then also like imagine if you got, because police are like, why would you burn that? Imagine if I wrote you a letter with like something so traumatic and awful that affects all of us in different ways. We would burn it. We'd be like, burn that. We don't ever want to see that again. I want to get rid of it. I would delete the text message.
Right.
You know, like they basically did that. Now, Florence followed this up by saying that she had repeatedly told the FBI that, quote, if Frank Natras did not do this himself, he sent his son, Ben, or he paid someone to do this to Joan, end quote. Investigators then interviewed Frank Natras and questioned him about all of these allegations, which he obviously denied. Then they compared his prints to the ones found at the scene, but no match. They compared Ben's, no match. Frank took 2 polygraphs, which both came back inconclusive, but his alibi for October 24th, 1961 was confirmed that he had been at work during the time frame that Joan went missing. But Ben did not get his alibi cleared because that day, October 24th, he was scheduled to work from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. He's a bartender. And no one could say for sure that he was there that day. They didn't have record. They didn't keep record of it, which I'm like, how is your payroll working then?
Right. And even then though, it all happened before 6 p.m.
Right. So he could have gotten there in time.
Yeah.
Or how was he acting? When investigators interviewed him, they noted that they felt he was over exaggerating and or faking his grief, turning it on and turning it off at different moments. But this was, even though they felt this way about him, they had nothing to hold him
Frank?
with. No, with Ben.
With Ben.
The brother, yeah.
Okay.
They had nothing to hold either of them. So they had to let them go. They tried to re-interview everyone in 1963 that had been originally interviewed or even touches Joan in any way, shape, or form. And they were able to get every single person that we've gone through today, every person, every random witness, so on and so forth, except for Ben. He was untraceable. They could not find him and they've never interviewed him again.
What do you do? Sneak out of the country?
I don't know. He's just gone.
What the fuck?
Some say that I tried to look into this and they were like, maybe he was in jail at that time, but I'm like, did he use a fucking fake name when he went to jail?
Right, they would have known that.
Right.
Especially because you're saying FBI, right?
I mean, FBI was involved in this. Yeah. Though I'm not exactly sure what it was that caused investigators to do this giant re-interview of everyone in 1963, I did come across a huge breakthrough that happened around this same time in that same year in Joan's case that flipped everything on its fucking head. But also, that would be what triggered them to go re-interview everyone. So hold on to your panties, ladies. This one's about to get crazy.
And your briefs, man.
And it involves us.
Us?
It involves an extension of us.
Me and you?
This is crazy.
It says Maureen and Taylar?
No, it doesn't involve us, but it's relatable to us, okay? So, a local Lincoln reporter for a local newspaper, 40-year-old Serene Gerson, had gone to the local library in Lincoln one day to check out a new book for herself. She chose a book titled Into Thin Air. It's about a woman who disappeared, leaving behind only a home of blood smears and towels as clues to where to find her. When Serene went to go check out this book, signing her name in the back like you'd have to in libraries, she spots something. It's Joan Risch's signature and the date, May 11th, 1961.
Chills.
She had checked out and read this book. Serene thought to herself, oh my God, wow, that is an awful foreshadowing moment, coincidence. But the reporter in her was like, dig into this.
Wait a second.
There's something here. She grabbed another crime book, just a random one off the shelf, and it was titled The Disappearance of Brigham Young's 27th Wife. And there was Joan's signature on the back. September 16th, 1961. Serene immediately took this to police, but first, she pulled together all of the records of the Risch family library card and got volunteers from the Lincoln Library Committee to help her sift through every single book that Joan had read. They went through every single one of these books from April 20th, 1961, the day the family got their library card, until the last one that she checked out just before her death. There were 24 books total. Most of them were crime novels, but there were some historical accounts, travel, and nature books as well. All of the things that we know Joan loves. Now, the second book that she ever checked out on April 26th was about a boy who went missing on purpose, which also stood out. This started a conversation about how Joan was really feeling about her life at this point. The move, motherhood of 2 children by herself, her husband's working all the time, how her marriage is doing, and how she's feeling with her career goals. There's a lot of discourse between what people feel that Joan was feeling at that time. She had been telling a lot of friends and family members that from the time they moved to Lincoln that she decided she wanted to be a English teacher when the kids got old enough that she could. So we can tell that she's getting a little bit antsy being a homemaker, being a stay-at-home wife, that's maybe not fulfilling her fully. So she's starting to think. She's starting to be like, okay, like what can I do after this? Making plans. And then other people are saying that maybe she wasn't as happy with Martin as she put off, because in the 60s you didn't tell anyone how you were actually feeling. You shut the fuck up and you put your head down and you did what you had to do. But everyone that knew Joan, like truly knew her, were like, this has nothing to do with Martin or the kids. This is her entire life. Like, this doesn't make sense. She was happy. She loved her life. There would have been signs if she wanted to get up and walk away. And like, also, what is she going to do? Use these like fake fiction novels to make a game plan?
Right.
About how she's going to get out. There's not any actual like spy books or detective books or Gone Girl books that have been no how-to guides being pulled on how to do it, on how to leave your life successfully or set up something to make it look like you were dead. And why would she do that?
Right.
No one can think of a good reason. Since then, Joan's case has, and guys, I'll try to find the full list. I had it on my notes and I can go pull it back up for you guys so you can look at all of the books that she checked out, because they are weirdly coincidental, if anything. Since then, Joan's case has sat unsolved for 62 years with no discoveries, no arrest, and no body. Martin refused to ever legally declare his wife dead because he didn't think that she was. He never changed his phone number, and he stayed at that exact same house and raised Lillian and David in that home without changing the locks once. In 1975, their home was bought by the National Park Service for the Minuteman National Park, historical, whatever the hell. And Martin had to move to another home just minutes away in South Lincoln, where he lived until the day that he died, keeping his number and locks the exact same. He died in 2009 at the age of 79, still not knowing what happened to Joan, but he wholeheartedly believed that she was out there and she was alive, and maybe she would walk back in his front door someday.
Wow.
So let's talk theories.
Please.
I'm going to list off to you guys, and I'm just going to discuss them. I'm not going to we already know what there is to discuss about these theories. We all know every single detail of the case. And that's why another reason I wanted to make this case its own episode is because people need to hear this case. People need to cover this case. We need to get it out there. People need to think, use your brain. Okay.
Right.
That's what needs to happen. There needs to be more eyes on this. And I think that this could be one that, if not like completely solved, but like there's some resolution to it. Someone knows something somewhere that will come forward. It's been 62 fucking years.
Right.
Half of these people are dead. So who's going to know? You know, there's probably
and maybe
something.
Lillian remembers something more that she, under hypnosis, anything. You know what I mean?
And you have to consider, with a case this old, there's stuff that they still haven't put out.
Right.
Because they've never marked it as,
Solved.
officially closed or anything
Right.
like that. Never accidental. It's just a missing persons case, a suspicious missing persons case, which is also weird when you look at the fact that her parents died in a very suspicious house fire. That was accidental. Right. So,
I forgot about that.
yeah. So here are, what I was going back to. Okay. With me making this its own episode and knowing that there's not that many podcasters that have covered it, I have triple checked my research. Like, there has been nothing, like maybe there's like a few details that could be off, and I've even like said when there has been something off. These are the facts. These are the most facts of the facts that I can find. Y'all rest assured that you can go out confidently and talk about this case, because if not, then all these sources are wrong. Right? Let's go through the main theories. Now, there's two sides of this. Number one, foul play is involved. Number two, foul play is not involved. Number one, foul play is involved. Frank killed her.
I would be on board with this because he does have motive. Like I was saying earlier, she helped his wife and his daughter get away. She outed him for the sexual abuse, the molestation. In
detail, with multiple people.
I do see that motive carried on with Ben through it, though, because he was cleared.
Right.
So it would have to be like
he hired someone.
A Frank and Ben or Hit all linked in together. But I'm also wondering, what was the relationship like with Frank and Joan's parents?
You know,
what could he have had to benefit
from adopting her?
Yeah.
Because why, if she's got other siblings, why did she end up going with Alice and Frank? Like, of all the people, we know that there's Florence. With the ones
that have the most kids
and all the things. And I tried to find if there was something about this in there, like maybe Alice and Josephine had like an agreement of some sort that they would take care of each other's children. I couldn't find any like bad blood that there could possibly be between Frank and them. But I also don't think that like Florence Bard, her other aunt, would have allowed her to go live with Alice and Frank if at that time Frank didn't seem like a good person, because business was good for him then. He was doing he owned his own music production, and they lived in New Rochelle. They, had a nice house that they could accommodate. They could feed all these kids. Like, they were doing pretty decent at this point in time. But what's so weird about it is the way that when Joan came to live with Frank and Alice, first thing he did was change her last name, which this girl has just been through something very, very extremely traumatic. Like, why are we rushing immediately? Why is that the first thing that we're doing?
I don't know, but speaking on Frank real quick, because this area is, you said, New York.
New York is
heavily tied to
mafia,
mobs.
Especially in the 60s.
The 60s in the music industry, the entertainment industry. Who funded that?
And I also want to know what her dad did. I saw like differing reports on it, so I didn't end up writing it down.
Wondering. Was the family involved or the parents involved somehow tied up with the mafia? Maybe for just like a shark loan.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a loan shark.
That's what I was thinking too.
Like for these little businesses because they're running.
Well, also we know that like Josephine, Harold, and Joan, prior to their death, like they were struggling. They were having to move back and forth a lot for work. They don't say I can't really find what they did. They applied for a social security card under the name Joan Natras, like the week that her parents died, though, which I think is weird. Who the fuck cared about it? Like, the importance of a social security card being appropriate in the 60s.
Right. That is weird.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Something, you're right. That does seem like there's like a hit involved in some way. And I also find it so weird that Florence was adamant he hired someone to do it if he didn't do it himself, or he sent his son. So kind of seems to me like this is something that Frank does.
Right.
Yeah.
And everyone was suspicious of the fire.
I don't know if he would have been involved in that, but like.
But what if he was?
But like, what if he was?
What if there was bad blood between their dad or her
and he
dad
confirmed
and
that she wasn't home. Joan wasn't home.
Yeah.
That night. Because like what are the chances?
If he gets say they had some sort of life insurance or whatever, as soon as she's legally his, they have access to that. She's 8 years old.
It's his.
His music career is booming.
Oh, also, if Frank had been the one to have gone over there, if it was someone that Josephine and Harold knew, then the dog wouldn't have gotten up and freaked out.
Right.
But it was in the middle of the night, though, and like the dog would have heard the fire or smelled the fire and got up and
it was clearly calculated.
Began
like
alerting. Yeah. This was plain. I think 100% her parents were murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I wish they would have seen that through, because that probably would have told us a lot more about what we need to be looking into when it comes to Joan's disappearance.
Right.
Okay. So number 2 under foul play is involved. Someone attacked her at random or had been like watching her. Realized, because she had a pretty like routine schedule.
Right.
The naps and when she needs to be home and when she's home for the day, when she gets all her errands done, when Barbara's there, when Barbara's kids are not there, when she's alone in the house. We know that her husband travels very often. So someone could have been watching her and getting familiar with her schedule and found out that Martin was going to be gone, which then it could be like someone who's a part of a drive or a routine past there, the milkman, the postman, the dry cleaner dude. But all those people were cleared.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I don't know. I'm for the car to have been spotted there 5 days prior, whatever it was, a couple days before, earlier that day, up in the driveway, at the bottom of the driveway, she would have picked up on that. And I feel like she would have been over to her bestie or her husband like, hey, I'm kind of getting weirded out. Like, I think someone's watching us.
Yeah. And it's not like this is a driveway that you would like turn down, like turn around in, like necessarily. There's a million driveways on that road. Yeah. You could have turned into any single one.
Right.
And it's not like you're going to come do that 5 days in a row.
Yeah.
You know, weird. Now, I'm going to give you guys a trigger warning because we're going to be discussing abortion, miscarriage in this section throughout for a little bit longer. But so number 3, with foul play being involved, does surround an illegal abortion. What the theory is with this is that she's pregnant. Some people say possibly by a lover. Some people say possibly by Martin, and she just didn't want to have another kid. She couldn't handle it with the rate that he was traveling and having 2 young kids. Or this was a hookup. Who knows, you know? But let's say she gets pregnant and she decides that she wants to have an abortion. It was illegal back then. Surprise everybody, it's still legal now here in Tennessee. And an illegal abortion doctor comes to do that, okay? Let's say something goes wrong.
Right.
And she begins bleeding out. She wants to go and call for help. That doctor would be charged and killed. That doctor would stop her from calling, which then the timeline of this car that's hanging around
kind of matches.
Come and have a meeting about her options and the procedure and everything 5 days prior. Come back. Park away so no one sees, and maybe he has to go get her body or something, and he freaks out. The doctor freaks out when she tries to call 911.
How would that tie into her on the road? That's what I keep forgetting.
That's the thing though,
we don't know if that was her.
So if she was on the road, let's go back through that with Frank. She's on the road. We don't know for sure that's her. This could be someone totally planned it could be someone totally different, or someone dressed up in Joan's outfit, made a big scene so Barbara would see, puts on Joan's outfit, walks around. That could be it. But if, let's say, Frank has her killed, Frank kills her. Maybe he gets her in the car. Maybe that's why there wasn't so much blood. She wasn't dead. Maybe she was incapacitated. She wakes up on Route 2A, jumps out of the car, rolls out, starts running, ends up very confused, not knowing where she's at. She's new to the area. She doesn't know the area like the back of her hand.
He picks her back up.
He either picks her back up. She's trying to walk home. He comes and picks her up. That could be the same as someone attacked her at random. She escapes. She rolls out. She's got an injury. She's disoriented, gets out. She's in the middle of the fucking median, all the different things. Or it couldn't even be her. But going back to the illegal abortion gone wrong, what doctor in the area would she know? That dentist. Why? Like, I've never seen this anywhere. I didn't see this written down. But when people talk about this potential abortion, she pulls out the 911, he rips it out. I'm thinking, what doctor would she know in this area?
Besides the dentist who she's had 11 cavities filled.
11 different appointments with. She had been with that morning. I have no idea what he drives.
Right.
And if he's a lot of dentists did perform illegal abortions during this time because they had the tools to do so, which is so sickening that literally we're covering something that happened 62 years ago, and we're in the exact same predicament right now. Like, what the fuck? Okay, moving on.
That's a good point.
Do you have anything that you think that would align with foul play is involved? I think Robert could technically have done it. Robert Foster, the National Parks buying agent.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about him.
Because, like, he's like, oh, she was with a girl.
Probably not.
No, she wasn't.
Our girl was very private.
And then a lot of people wonder if he actually raped Joan and she was pregnant from that incident, and that's why she was getting an abortion that day, or reached back out to him or something, that he was in the area. Maybe that's why he was there. Who knows?
Interesting.
That's one that's been floated around.
I think the emergency line to me and the Miller's
weird. So what did this fucking illegal back
that's why I think it would be someone that she knew.
Abortion.
It would be Ben. It would be Frank. It
could be Dr. Goldstein. He's like, do you care if I have a beer, or you drink a few beers? Because she had gotten, specifically wrote on his record that she had been given lidocaine that day to get her her cavity filled. And I think it's weird that, like, she got her cavity filled the same day that Lillian had to go get a cleaning. Like, why wouldn't you leave Lillian with Barbara? Because you're about to get a filling done. That's going to take a sec. And what's Lillian going to do? Sit in your lap the whole time?
Right. Yeah, her cleaning is 20 minutes.
Right, and whereas all the other 11 ones, either Sabra, Jane, or Barbara had been watching the kids, or Martin.
Yeah.
So it's just weird.
Yeah, that dentist is suspicious.
It's a little sus. And I haven't seen that anywhere, and I'm proposing a theory. This is alleged. This is alleged. All. Yeah, this whole section is theories, conspiracy theories. They're not real. Okay. Next, foul play is not involved. Number 1. At-home abortion by herself gone wrong. Thought maybe I'm going to call police and then realized that she would probably be prosecuted, get in trouble for doing so. Supporting this is the fact that there was that broken plastic hanger, and this is so gory and so awful, but it's reality when you don't have access to fucking healthcare.
Right. And it was like the number one most common way that
Women
people did at home.
Yep. So maybe she
In the metal hanger.
in the metal
on the car.
So then maybe she was trying to give herself an at-home abortion. The first one breaks. She puts it in the trash can. She remembers that there's another one, a wire one. She tries to use that.
Right.
But if she walked Lillian and Douglas over at 1:55, 5 minutes before David woke up, why would she try in a 5-minute window?
Right.
She it's not going to be a fast situation.
I feel like those hangers either are a sign of an abortion, I think if it was a dentist, he would use something else. An at-home abortion, or I think it's a sign of going back to Frank, Ben, random person or whatever, as you were saying, dressing up. They had ripped those jackets off the freaking closet, 2 hangers, 2 different jackets.
Yep. Yeah.
Swapped outside from the right on top of the car.
Yeah.
Swapped the
Changed
tan
her
coat
outside
to the gray, got in the car, went down the highway.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. Like took that tan one, went and hung it back up because she had made a loud sound at that point in time.
Yeah.
And then what was the red thing? No one can ever figure out what the red thing in her hand was.
So wait, what do people believe the red thing was? A baby? A fetus?
No. They don't know if it was blood or...
And a towel?
Because, I mean, across the street, I mean, you see how far... And we know that they're across, like, way back on the properties where their house are sitting. Red, like, I wouldn't see blood and be like, that's red. You know what I mean? Like, it would be like a red shirt, a red ball or something like that. Like a bright, like a real red, not like a blood red. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between the two. And it's not like it's outside, so it was a moving thing. Barbara said that she thought that the red thing was low to the ground and that Joan was like reaching to get it, but could be if it was an abortion or so on. But we do have one on the same like abortion path in the not foul play. And that is that she maybe had an unexpected miscarriage, like was newly pregnant, ends up having a miscarriage. That's why she immediately took Lillian and Douglas across the street. Yeah. She needed to go take care of herself before David woke up, and she was trying to call for help to go to a hospital or even call Barbara when she got back home. Who knows? And then something happened. Maybe she's so upset about it that she rips the phone from the wall. She throws it. She starts drinking. Who knows? You know, like whatever it could have been. She doesn't go and get David, and she slips into a form of psychosis, or whether it is the miscarriage or the abortion. Some people believe that she could have slipped into a psychosis with that, or had felt so much shame in doing so and had hurt herself or had gotten hurt in the midst of it and just panicked and walked out the door, was going to like take herself as far away from her babies as possible so that she could end her own life. But there's no body. And there was no way that the bloodhounds would have followed her scent all the way down 2-way, all the way down Route 128. She had to have gotten into a car. So the thing is with that is maybe a doctor did perform an abortion, or someone was there with her when she was miscarrying, when she was having an abortion. If this was the case, no matter what it was, if someone was there with her, did they put her, like say like, I'll meet you this place, or try to take her to the doctor and she's like, I want out, I'm going to be prosecuted. Like who knows? You know, like it could be a variety of these things, but we do know that she potentially was spotted walking on 2-way and then walked on 2-way, somehow got to Route 128, which is right beside her house, and then like on the interstate on the other side of town. I don't know.
Like a car.
Let me pull that up again. I have the map in here.
Well, I also feel like that psychosis or that anger at herself would match with the scene of where everything was flipped over, misplaced.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like flipping, like just being
smeared,
fucking
like just
mad.
like mad and like hitting your hand on the ground.
She goes in there and she looks at David sleeping in his crib. That's why there's blood on the windowsill. She maybe looks out at Lillian and she decides that she wants to walk away from her life, which is the next theory. That something happened. It became too much. She wanted to walk away from her life, whether that was triggered by an abortion, a miscarriage, maybe even just like cutting her finger.
Yeah.
And it just was like the fucking final thing that she could take that day. And so she lost her mind and was like, I got to go. She was in psychosis. Like, she could still have been struggling with postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis and never known.
And maybe she's had a miscarriage before and
never told anyone.
Got a really bad nosebleed, and that sight of blood on the ground
triggered her in some way. It could be anything. Another one that everyone always tries to go with is suicide. I really don't feel like this is suicide. Like, how would you hide your body, or you didn't write a note? Like, you didn't tell someone to come check on your kids. You didn't know for sure that anyone was even going to be there, that Lillian would even know to come.
I'm over faking a death more so than suicide.
Me too, 100%. So walking away from her life in the way of like faking her own death. She, if that was the case, she literally took it out of the script for Into Thin Air. Wild. So then half a pint of blood, that's how much you would be able to get out if you were trying to still be able to run away.
Right.
And did she have someone come pick her up?
And maybe there was a friend that no one knew about.
That was coming
and
to get her.
And that guy wasn't lying.
Yeah.
She was coming.
She was really there, and they set this all up. It was a month prior to the day. Come a month from now, and we'll go. Martin's going to be out of town. I'll make sure that something's set up in the evening that Barbara will need to come over here. She can watch the kids, and I can get out. Because what better bait for Barbara to go to the house than
your own kid
Lillian and Douglas just being walked over there without any explanation. Like,
right.
That would be so out of character for Joan that Barbara would be like, what the fuck? Let me walk over there.
Right.
Who knows? And then Barbara's so mad that she just keeps fucking rolling.
And this is like crazy, but like, what about Barbara?
I know.
Like, she's really the only person that knows anything throughout the day, and she's the only one that saw something red. Like you said, you're not going to be able to see that blood
across the room.
So either that could have just been like, she saw the crime scene, she's thinking about it at her day, and she's like, I know I saw something red. Like, maybe I did. You know what I mean? Like,
maybe it was blood. Yeah.
How you can do that to yourself, and like maybe that's the case, but I don't know, maybe
she's the only person that saw her all day, other than the doctor, the dentist.
She's given us the story.
This story is the account of Barbara. Now, police say that she was completely cleared and that she had no motive for anything.
I don't think she did, but like,
me
also
either.
Just throw the question out.
It's just weird.
Yeah,
it really is weird.
And also, what if Lillian didn't walk back across the street?
Right.
You know,
what would have happened?
A 4-year-old.
Yeah, 4-year-old.
Walking back across the street by herself.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Nothing about it makes sense at all. So this next one, this is what her husband, Martin, believed until the day he died, like wholeheartedly. He believed that she was working out in the yard and she hurt herself somehow, fell, hit something, hurt herself, walked Lillian and Douglas across the street just so they could be somewhere and she could go help herself before David woke up. Didn't have time to talk to Barbara. And maybe she was bleeding when she walked her across the street, got inside, realized how bad it was, maybe had it wrapped up when she was bringing them over, got inside, realized how bad it was, maybe faints because there's so much blood so fast, and she didn't think it was that bad because she was working out in the yard with shears.
Sometimes the sight of blood.
Yeah. She was working out with shears though. That's what she was doing before she walked them back over. So maybe she fainted, hit her head, had amnesia, woke up, began just walking. That's why she's walking while she's bleeding. That's why she's holding. That's why she's walking aimlessly, looks disheveled, going different directions, all the different things. It's October 24th, so it's cold. It's in Connecticut. I mean, it's in Boston. It's cold. So she just like put on like random coats and stuff and like head out the door and just had amnesia and just had no idea where the fuck she was or what was going on.
Wow.
I mean, we've covered Stephen Kubacki, which there's an update in that case. We've covered the dude that I just recently covered.
The skiing guy.
A skiing guy. We've done this many a times where people just have no recollection of like a long period of time in their lives.
Yeah.
So it could be that, and that's the only thing that Martin could
settle with, because nothing else makes sense to him. Like she would never just choose to leave her kids here squalling, knowing that he's not even going to be home at 5 p.m. He's going to be home the next day. Not the Joan he knew.
Yep, right. Like he knew. The next one is that she suffered a mental health episode of some sort. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in her past that would indicate this, like not in her family history that anyone knew of. But I did come across this, and I confirmed it but I came across this comment and I went and I pulled up the sources. It's true. And so I wanted to bring it to your attention. This guy named Chris K commented on an article that was explaining the different theories in this case, and 4 years ago commented, I've studied this case for years, even spoke with a few detectives around at the time. I first came to the conclusion that Joan was bored of her mundane life in the burbs and wanted out, so she faked something. She faked something that mirrored the book that she had read Into Thin Air, and ended up living somewhere where she wrote books underneath a different name. And there are many things that point to that. But then I came across something. Joan's son, David, who is now in his 50s, relatively very young, lives in some kind of care home about 30 minutes outside of Lincoln. And about a dozen times over last year, he got up to take a stroll and had gone missing and would be brought back days later by police. He just gets up, goes for a walk, and never comes back. They found him in various different locations, once laying in a field. He didn't know who he was, and then at other times he's perfectly normal. If you go back to Joan's parents, they died in a house fire that cannot be explained. So what does that mean? But I'm not here to diagnose anyone. This guy, Chris, is kind of a dick for the way that he worded the rest of it. But I looked that up, and that's true. David has, for the majority of his adult life, has been living in assisted care facilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I have no idea anything about Lillian.
But you also have to think that is could be trauma induced.
That's what I'm thinking. So we have no idea. I mean, but
yeah.
it still would affect him in a way. Like, for sure. Growing up knowing that you were left there for almost an hour squalling while you're abandoned. Like, that would give you, that would really like be traumatic for a kid growing up knowing, and probably lead to a bunch of other things happening. But like, we don't know when that started, what caused it, and we don't have any detail about his history or anyone's medical history, so I don't want to assume
and again, the dogs probably would have picked something up.
The dogs would have known.
Or she would have been, someone would have stopped.
Yeah.
And been like, hey, maybe someone did, and maybe it was a wrong, bad person that stopped, and that's why she was never seen again.
But you know what I just realized? The biggest thing, not the biggest, but like one of the bigger things at the house was the phone. The phone was ripped out, the cord was off, emergency pages were open, flipped over, blood smeared around the phone.
Someone was blowing her out on the phone.
But her dad died holding the phone in the kitchen of the floor of the house when he died of smoke inhalation. What if that was like her like
trigger,
trying to like say like trying to give a sign of some sort? You just rip out the phone as you're fighting and throw it out, But like, there wasn't like broken, shattered glass everywhere, anything like that. But then again, she's a mom. Her daughter's sitting across the street. If someone came out of the woods when Douglas and Lillian were playing and David's asleep upstairs, 5 minutes before he wakes up, puts a gun up to her head and says, "I'm taking you, get in the fucking car," she would say, "Let me walk my daughter across the street. My son's sleeping. I'm going to put on my jacket." She screams.
Another similarity from that case to this case was that David was left alone upstairs, just like the dog was left alone upstairs in her bedroom, right?
In her bedroom, yeah, asleep, wrapped in a blanket. Weird.
Yeah.
Now, lastly, this is the final thing that's like widely speculated. Those construction zones on the side of Route 128. A lot of people believe that if she had gone walking for whatever reason, it could have been, no matter what, that there were like massive holes that were being dug and like tons of construction stuff and equipment over there. Like, something could have happened to her and she could have fallen into something.
Right.
And
had no idea. Gravel over top. Cement.
Yep.
Paved.
Which is why she's never been found. I think they said like 5,000 different fingerprints have been compared to the fingerprints that were found in the home. Her dental records have been sent to like all unidentified Jane Does ever. Bones, everything, her dental DNA, everything. Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing has ever been connected to her.
That is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Is there a movie?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, nobody knows about this fucking case. Like, this sounds like damn Gone Girl. Like, it seriously does. It's crazy. Nothing. I looked all over. Like, I had to watch like shitty YouTube videos, bad YouTube videos.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, my mind, every theory that you gave, my mind is going down that whole, I could see that, I could see that, I could see that.
You could have like a pro and a con for every single one.
Yeah.
Like that one where I got that comment off of, it was a really well written article, and I need to link it so that you guys can see it and read through it if you want to. But just in case it's not linked for you guys, it's the Medium article Into Thin Air by William Keckler. Basically, they put forth the different theories and say whether or not, based off their research, if this is feasible or not. But that's the case.
I mean, I love the way you covered it.
Thank you.
It was good. It's a crazy fucking case.
It's crazy. I mean, it's mind blowing. There's
that,
nothing
that
about
to me
it.
is like a case where it's going to be solved.
Right, because like
it's right there.
Something's here.
Right
There's a million things that we have to look at here.
Yeah.
And with today's technology, like if they took this case as seriously as they said they did, and that they've been acting like they have, do some tests. Run some tests. There's got to be something. Something.
I agree.
One thing.
And
there's so many.
The house was bought for a preservation, right? Or is it knocked down?
So here's the thing about that. I forgot to mention this. When they bought the house in 1975 from Martin Risch, he moved to a different location in South Lincoln. But the house was moved to Lexington,
Kentucky?
I don't know. It just says Lexington. Let me see if there's a Lexington in this area, because that would tell us a lot. Okay, here we go. To Lexington. Lexington in Massachusetts. It's a suburb 10 miles from downtown Boston.
What if she lived there the entire time? In the same house, new location.
Why would they pick that house up and move it?
I have no idea.
What the fuck is the point of that?
No idea.
Like, why wouldn't Martin stay in it if it was just going to be moved? Like, what was that about? Maybe Martin knew the truth about what really happened.
Yeah. And he was like, you want the house?
Yeah.
Here's the house.
Or maybe they continued, like, being together, but something had happened. Maybe she had to go into witness protection. Who fucking knows? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, witness protection is actually a very good theory.
Because, like, there's no footprints anywhere at all in this entire house, and she's potentially struggling with someone. No one saw or heard anything other than her shouting and like saying something in an authoritarian voice.
Yeah, and like, what was she saying?
They said it was just like a hey, you know, like a something like that.
Like how I
would
yell at the cat.
Yeah, like how if Ollie was doing something, yo, quit type of thing.
I would.
Or like a come back here.
I wouldn't do that, but yeah.
Yeah, you would.
Ollie.
That's how you say. You say, bro. What is it? Don't do that. What? Excuse me. That's what you say. That it would sound like your authoritarian voice, though. Like you're saying something demanding and stern, but it's not like frantic and screaming.
Right.
You know.
It's just like she's yelling.
Yeah, like stop, or because for Barbara to at first like reaction think like, oh, David's, you know, running down the driveway and she's grabbing him so he doesn't fall because he's 2 and he's wobbly.
Maybe that does go hand in hand with an abortion by a physician. Stop. Like, enough.
Right. But then why would she be running out to the car with a fucking coat hanger? Illegal abortion would not be performed if by a doctor with a coat hanger.
Maybe it wasn't a doctor. Maybe it was a friend.
Maybe it was a friend.
No idea. Thanks for that.
You're welcome, guys.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Happy freaking New Year. Merry Creepsmas. Thanks for everyone that came and joined our live. We had the best time.
It was so fun.
It was so fun. We want to do it again. Okay, guys. Well, we'll see you next week for Morgan's Creeps.
See you next year.
Happy new creeps. What?
I don't know.
I'm okay.
New year, new us.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2024, which is going to be our fucking year because Season 4, 2024, Morgan's getting married, 4, 4s, 2s,
a lot of 4s.
A lot of things that we love, even numbers, you know, that's our fave. That's when we thrive.
We do better even years, so.
Yeah, a little bit. Just a tiny bit. All right, guys. Love you guys. Be so safe this new year and enjoy yourself.
Love ya.
Tag us some pics where you look cute. Love you. Bye.
Bye.